Hi, this is Professor JPS, and this is information for Communication Arts 101, Section 1. First of all, I just want to say to everyone, please stay safe. Stay as safely as possible. Stay as safe as possible. Make sure you're adhering to the rules about social distancing and washing your hands, okay? It's really very important. Even though you guys are all young, it's still very, very important. This is unprecedented times we're in, so please make sure that you're staying as safe as possible and taking it very seriously. Okay, this is no joke. This is no joke. So since we're going to be doing this for the rest of the semester, I've decided to stick to the syllabus. Even though right now, today, it's Friday, March 20th, this lecture is the lecture for Monday, March 23rd. It's a prep lecture for the exam, which is Wednesday, March 23rd, and will be administered via email. So what I'm doing in this particular lecture is just giving a review of the 3 chapters and some of the ideas for the film chapter, the television chapter, and the advertising chapter, and whatever handouts we had previously had given you. I just want to be certain that everyone who's listening to this make absolutely certain that you're utilizing your NCC emails, okay? There's a way in which you can have your NCC emails be transferred to your personal email. But I just want to be certain that I'm reaching everyone in all the emails that I'm giving ComArts 101. Since this current week was spring break, I know that maybe some students just were sort of out of touch and maybe not reading their emails as much. So just keep that in mind, that you must adhere to at least your NCC email, because I think I'm reaching you with that. So if you haven't received any emails from me, look into your NCC email and just try to email me, okay? It's very important that you have your NCC email and your personal email hooked up. I think you can do that through Outlook. I don't think it's very, very hard. Okay? The test will be slightly different than the first test, since the first test had multiple guess questions. I can't really do that. So what I'm going to do is have 4 15-point essay questions and 15, 30, 45, 60, and then 4 10-point essay questions. And when I administer them, I'll administer them in a mass email to everyone sometime on Wednesday morning. And you have till, what did I say? By Friday at noon. Friday the 27th, okay? And I think what you should do, for 2 reasons, I think you should make sure when you get the test questions is that when you get the test questions, convert the test questions into a Word document, and then answer the questions as best as possible, and then send the answers to me in an email attachment. And just be absolutely certain that you're signing off like with your full name and which class you're in. ComArts 101, Section 1, okay? Because I'm just going to be getting a slew of emails, and I have to make sure I get, I know who everyone is specifically, not your email name, which could be different than what your regular name is. Okay, so please be careful of that. Okay, so let's just move to discuss film, television, and advertising. In terms of the film unit, there's not that much from the textbook that I'm pulling from. But I think these are the pages I think that you can look through. Pages 338 and 339, that's just a timeline. You don't have to memorize those pages. Just read them over to get a sense of the history of Hollywood. I mean, just read them over. Just familiarize yourself with them just for a moment or two. You don't have to go crazy on those timelines. Those timelines are useful in as far as they can give you a sense of things, just so your brain is taking it in for a little bit. The other key pages for that particular unit are 340 to 343. And that's not much. And again, you don't need to memorize anything there. Just get a sense of it. The key stuff from the film unit really has to do with the beginnings of cinema, as we discussed, and you should have in your notes, 1895 to 1915. New York City and the East Coast is where cinema was born, essentially. The first 5 years was just images on a screen. The next 5 years was working with narrative and editing to try to tell stories. The next 5 years had to do with the star system and reaching larger audiences and building very, very large movie theater palaces. And those movie theater palaces drew in not just poor immigrant people, but working and middle class audiences. So those first 10 or 15 years of cinema were starting from nothing and then becoming a very prized media product that was ripe for change. It happened relatively quickly. So you may remember that. That's an important issue. The other important issue related to that is the move to California from New York. And that move happens in and around 1915. And it happens because of a couple of reasons. One, it was cheap real estate in California at the time. And the topography was much different than New York City. And the climate was much different. The climate was beautiful, 80 degrees most days, or around there. And the topography, meaning the lay of the land, that there were mountains an hour away, there's a desert 20 minutes away, there's a city 20 minutes away, there's an ocean 20 minutes away. There's a great deal of choices in order to shoot film all year round. But the key reason was that cheap real estate. And upon that cheap real estate, the studios were built. The heads of the studio system built this gigantic studio system on top of cheap real estate in and around the early to mid-teens. Okay? That's an important idea. But the key and big key, the most important idea about the film unit has to do with what they did with those studios. And they built two things that made Hollywood so supremely successful all the way into the 1960s. The one thing was an economic reason, vertical integration, which is the ownership of production, distribution, and exhibition of movies. They own the production facilities where they made the movies. They own the distribution houses that got the films from Hollywood to local movie theaters all over the country, and they own the movie theaters. There was no way to not make a profit on every film they made. It was really, really very powerful economic machine. And remember, this is all before television mostly. It's before radio to some degree for a while. It's certainly before any kind of digital media that we're used to. People went to the movies like crazy. It was supremely powerful and important in terms of money. The other key reason was the development of genre, making different kinds of films for different kinds of audiences. Hollywood did not just make a handful of kinds of films for this demographic or that demographic. They made genres and subgenres and sub-subgenres to extend the audience. For instance, you don't like the same movies maybe your aunt does or your nephew does or your boyfriend does or your girlfriend. So it's different strokes for different folks. So those are the really two key reasons for the overwhelming economic success of the Hollywood industry in the first part of the 20th century leading up into the 1960s. Okay? And that's very, very important stuff in terms of this film unit. Okay? So those pages and those ideas. Another key thing about Hollywood was how Hollywood then suffered after they lost vertical integration in the 50s and how television affected Hollywood. And then Hollywood lost money between the 50s and 60s. And then what happened after that is the hippies, or the people who were born baby boomers, hippies, they came along and started making some interesting and challenging film in the 60s and 70s and helped put Hollywood back on the map because they started to use the changing 1960s as a way in which to tell interesting stories. And there were some really wonderful films made from the mid-60s to about 1980 that not only were critically successful, films like The Godfather or what have you, but also commercially successful. And then by the 70s, you have Spielberg making Jaws and Lucas making Star Wars, and the notion of the blockbuster really took over about 40 years ago. And since that time, Hollywood has been extremely successful, generally speaking, in a variety of ways. And now they're hand in hand with streaming and digital marketing, or digital filmmaking and digital marketing and so forth. Okay, that history is important to understand in terms of the formations of it. Okay. So, also one more thing about motion pictures. Product placement has become very important in motion pictures. I think you know what product placement is. We went over a little bit in class. It's the idea that there's a relationship between advertisers and the Hollywood community to have the advertisers place products that are then named in films and given a little bit of space to show off, so to speak, as a way to advertise certain products. I mean, even some titles of films or actual product placements, like Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. I mean, the name White Castle is in the name of the film. So that's another important issue. Okay. So I'm going to end part 1 right now to then try to give it some upload time. And then when we return, we will do television. And then we'll return after that, we will do advertising. Thank you and stay safe.